for the Board of Education in the Fairfax County here in the D.C. area. And her topic will be education.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى أهله وصحبه أجمعين. I need to talk louder? Okay. I'm a bit short. I'm very happy that I was asked to speak today about education because I believe that education is one of the most important areas that Muslims have to address. And while our objective, our final objective, is not just to become part of the system that we experience now and that we see, our objective, our final objective, is to create our own Islamic systems, and not only create Islamic systems for Muslims, but to look at all the other people who are sharing this country with us as potential Muslims. And if we look at them as potential Muslims and feel that we have the obligation, which Allah has told us, to try to bring them into the same style of thinking, into the same way of behaving, into the same objectives that we have, then we have to have some way that we can communicate with them and some way we can work with them. And in that long-range process of making America Muslim, all of America Muslim, then we have to have some actual short-range goals. We have to have some way of dealing with them and know how we're going to deal with them and in which ways, and be very calculated about it, or else we will not accomplish our goals. Is education political? Yes, it is. Education is extremely political because it shapes our minds, it shapes our idea of who we are and what we are, it shapes our ideas of what we can be. Yesterday when I was listening to one of the other speakers, I became amused because it reminded me of a situation with my own little daughter. It wasn't a speaker, actually. It was a person who stood up from the audience and said, "We're not American, we're Muslim." Well, I've always brought my children up, alhamdulillah, to think of themselves first, last, and always as Muslim. When we lived overseas in a Muslim country, I let them identify themselves as Muslims. And we lived there for 10 years. When we came back a year ago, my little daughter, who's in 2nd grade, kept saying to her teacher, "I'm not American, I'm Muslim." And after a while, I started getting notes coming home saying, "What does she mean?" You know? And I got the same sort of notes from the school where we were overseas, in a Muslim country, so-called Muslim country. The principal said, "What does she mean?" And she was in a Muslim country. And they would say, "Well, you're American, right?" She said, "No, I'm Muslim." And the principal here said the same thing. That shows that we have similar kinds of problems in approaching the field of education, whether we're living in a so-called Muslim country or whether we're living here in the United States. 6 months later, my daughter came to me and said, "Is there another thing that we're called American?" You know, she still isn't quite sure about it. Alhamdulillah, she's still identifying herself as a Muslim. I wanted to show, first of all, what did the Prophet ﷺ do in Mecca and in Medina in terms of education. Education was a priority for the Prophet. On an individual level, he used to spend hours and hours and hours just discussing things with people, listening to their problems, listening to their questions, answering them, and on a personal level, every single Asr time, afternoon time, he spent with his family educating them. He did not say, "Well, I'm a leader now and I don't need to do that." He spent every single afternoon with his family, exclusively, teaching them. And I would like to ask how many of our Muslim fathers and Muslim husbands do that today? The most active ones among the Muslims say, "Well, I'm a leader now. I don't have time for my family." And if they're not a leader, they say, "That's what women are supposed to do." And they don't carry on that responsibility. The Prophet ﷺ was our best example. He spent 13 years in Mecca preparing minds. He spent 13 years preparing personalities. He spent 13 years developing a concept, and then he took it to Medina. And he carried it on there, and it was public, and it was established. And once he carried it on, and once he established it, he didn't leave it there. He continued to build it even to a better extent. Now, what did the Prophet do, alayhi salam, when he was in Medina? He had to deal not only with Muslims, but with pagans and with Jews. And he did use deferential treatment. He did use different kinds of treatment between the three groups. But he drew their focus to the fact that there is something called an Islamic State, and you are going to be a part and parcel of that Islamic State. Are we at that position now? We're not. Can we try to act as if there is nothing out there, there is no public school education going on? No, we can't. We are in the process of developing Islamic education for our children. And yes, all of us have the hope and dream, inshallah, of creating not only Islamic schools that cooperate with each other, but Islamic school systems that would span the country. That's where our further objective is. And we want to make those schools so good that the non-Muslims will be signing up in long lists to enter them because they're excellent. We want to be dedicated to excellence. But are we there yet? No, we're not. So in the meantime, what do we do with the millions of Muslim children who are going to public school? We've got to do something with them, and we've got to be involved in some way. In dealing with this process, in dealing with the process of reaching our larger goals, we have to define who we are and what we are. And the major part of that definition is to remember the ayah of Allah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ma khalaqna jins wal insan illa ta'buduni. I did not create men and jinn except to worship me. So that our whole life and our whole service, as Allah said in the Quran, my life, my service of sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds. So education is just one part of that. It's not separated from it. So as we approach the public school system, we have to approach it with that credo, that we see ourselves as worshiping Allah in being involved with them in any way. At the same time, we cannot accept the definitions that other people try to tell us. We cannot accept definitions that non-Muslims shape for us. In recent times, they try to tell us that we have only two alternatives. We either have the alternative of becoming a second-class citizen to the Judeo-Christian heritage, and we will never be first-class citizens in that case, or our other alternative is to become part of a, in quotes, pluralistic society. And a pluralistic society right now is really a catchword for secular humanism. Are those our only alternatives? No. Can we shape our own? Yes. Should we be shaping them instead of asking non-Muslims to shape our definition of ourselves? Yes. Why do we wait, and why do we have this inferiority complex that tells us that we cannot define our own agenda? Yes, we can define our own agenda, and that agenda is Islam, and what our question is not what our agenda is, but how to work it out toward the proper goal of worshiping Allah. In the Quran, we are asked to agree with the Ahl al-Kitab, the Christians and the Jews, on what basic concepts we have in common, and that is belief in Allah. We have belief in Allah as a common concept. We have belief in Allah as a common concept, and we can try in our own ways to see how we can work out an agreement with them on that issue. We believe in the last day. They do too. We believe in a judgment day. We believe in an afterlife. Let us see how we can interface with them and interact with them in a way where we'll be able to express Islamic values and get them to come to the conclusions of the values that we do share. There are certain questions that we have to ask in this process. For what purpose education? And we realize that the purpose of American public education is to create orderly consumers who obey the law and do exactly what they're told and buy a lot of things and sell a lot of things and make money move in the society so that the people who are rich can get richer and they can keep their positions as they are. That is how the American economic and the American educational system works at the moment. But our purposes are different. The purposes of education for a Muslim are to gain knowledge about everything, to look at everything as a source of knowledge, and to use that knowledge for the good of all humanity. Now, if we realize that, then we should be involved. We should be involved at every level, the local level, the county level, the state level, the national level, and the international level. How are we going to be involved? We want to be involved as a distinct Islamic entity. And I say Islamic and not Muslim because there are lots of Muslims running around who don't even know what their agenda is and who start defining their agenda through the eyes of non-Muslims. So that I want to say Islamic. And if we are Islamic individuals and we come to our relationship and our connection with the public school system as Islamic individuals, then we will not be part of the great, what they call, American melting pot. We do not want to melt into American society and disappear. We want to go into American society with Islamic ideals and revamp their thinking. We want to revamp them. We want to turn them into Muslim individuals. We shouldn't have feelings of a distaste for them or intolerance because they're potential Muslims. In the beginning of Islam, at the time when it first entered Arabia, of course Islam started from the beginning of the world. But when we identify it with the movement that Muhammad ﷺ brought and perfected, they weren't Muslims, they were pagans. At least the people in this country have many, many things that they recognize. One of them is a belief in God. Even if it's a tacit agreement that there is a God, they have this belief, and we can work on that. How should we be involved? We have to be involved in a very diligent way, in a very concise way. We have to be involved in a way where we sit down and make long-range planning and understand how we can be involved so that when we do something, we choose what we do, and we do the amount of work that we know we can carry on consistently. The Prophet ﷺ said he likes us to be involved in consistent work. He doesn't like us to start something and drop it. He wants us to start something and continue with it. There are certain obstacles. Muslims have a lot of character building to do before they can even begin to communicate with the larger society. Muslims are lazy, they're late, they like to argue with each other, they like to fight with each other more than they fight with non-Muslims. They have an inability to analyze and synthesize ideas. They're not solution-oriented, they're problem-oriented. And they have a real problem with constructive criticism, and they have even a greater problem if that constructive criticism comes from women. We have another problem, that is our conception of ourselves and the non-Muslim conception of who we are. A lot of times we define who we are by what they say we are. And a lot of times our definition is defined by what we want and not what Allah wants. One speaker yesterday, Siraj Wahaj, talked about Allah's agenda. How many of us really are trying to institute Allah's agenda and not our own. Most of the non-Muslims see us as other because they don't see us. Muslims are not involved in anything when it comes to education, politically, or any otherwise. Muslims are very quiet. They're almost ashamed to say, I'm Muslim. I went to a local high school in the area where I live about 6 months ago, and I knew about 30 of the Muslim children who were in that one Muslim high school, and among all the 30, there were only 2 kids who said, Assalamu alaikum. They were ashamed to signify that they were Muslim. I thought that was pitiful. And these kids come from so-called activist Muslim parents who haven't even built in their children the pride to say Assalamu alaikum. We have to start motivating ourselves and our children to be further involved. If you don't mind, I'll just take about 3 minutes. Is that all right? No? I just asked the chair if it's all right. Okay. To talk about what kinds of involvements we can have. On the local level, we need to volunteer much more readily than we do now. The way to get recognition, the way to get acceptance, the way to be able to be in a position to express Muslim concepts is to volunteer. First thing is the PTA. Most Muslims are not involved in the PTA whatsoever, the Parent-Teacher Association. They don't even go to the meetings. They don't know what's going on with their kids in the public school. Second thing are the school board meetings. School board meetings are public. In a lot of cities, they have them on television, which is wonderful. You don't even have to go out of your house. Just turn it on and find out what they're doing with your kids in the public school. Comes on every month. If it doesn't come on, make an effort to go at least 3 or 4 times a year to the school board meeting and find out what they're talking about, what their ideas are. Okay, you can become an office assistant, you can become a reading assistant, you can become a library assistant and try to buy Islamic books or get them from organizations and give them to your local school library. You should try, and we should all be involved in developing Arabic language courses in the public schools, because one way of introducing non-Muslims to Islam is to have them come and be a part of Arabic courses, Arabic language courses. And don't forget, classical Arabic is the Quranic Arabic. So when we say Arabic courses, we're talking about classical Arabic, and our real agenda is Quranic Arabic. And that's a good way of introducing Islam to non-Muslims. We should try to be on the book review committees. There are book review committees for every type of subject, for the social studies books, for the literature books. Muslims need to join those book review committees and see what they're writing and have an input into how the curriculum will be. The book companies do listen to these book review committees, and they have to adjust, because if they don't, they won't be bought for that school system. We should be involved in the family life education. In Fairfax County, for instance, they just passed a new family life education curriculum for, not the curriculum, but the plans for the curriculum that are teaching our kids horrific things. For instance, they're going to teach our children from first grade and second grade and third grade that they may or may not accept a friendly touch from their parents. And if they don't like the touch, they should stand up loudly and say no. They're teaching them this from kindergarten. And unless we know what they're teaching, we will not be able to change it. They're teaching our 7th graders that the classroom teachers are going to sit there and decide for your child what their future goals should be. That's part of family life education. They were going to teach them that abortion centers are a community resource. This is all part of family life education. If you don't know what it is, you cannot help. You cannot change the ways things are going to be taught. You've got to get in there and be involved. The Human Relations Committee. Muslims should join the Human Relations Committee, because many of the issues that impinge on the way Muslims are being taught are dealt with in the Human Relations Committee. We should join teachers' unions and encourage Muslim children to be teachers. We should join the Gifted Children Program, the Personnel Advisory Committee, and the school board. We should try to be on the school board. On a county level, they have the Human Rights Commission, the Human Services Council, the Juvenile Court Advisory Committees, drug committees, Board of Education that we should try to have members on, as I said, the Mayor's Advisory Council, and with the State Board of Educations. On the national level, we have the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, to name a few. We need, inshallah, in the future to develop a National Muslim Council of Education. And within that National Muslim Council of Education, we need to do many, many things, a few of which are to make a list of acceptable books for the book companies, to have a speakers bureau for schools, to have a federal funds data bank so that we can let Muslims know what federal funds are available that they can have access to have a federal law data bank so that Muslims know what the federal laws are, to use them for the good of Muslims. We should be able to have a national place where we distribute Islamic books to public school systems, and we should coordinate the outreach programs to teachers and to non-Muslims through the public school systems. I hope that, inshallah, we will at some point be able to develop such a national council. Shukran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.